Hey everybody, welcome back to Sweatpants BI. This is part 2 of our Power BI Sandbox tutorial. In the first part of this video, I showed you how to use personalized visuals functionality in Power BI Desktop and the Tabular editor to sort of create a sandbox environment where you have deployed guardrails to sort of protect your users from stumbling on parts of your data model or measures that you would rather someone who didn't build the tool not know about, or at the very least not be able to see and play around with. Using the tabular editor, we were able to create perspectives where you could manually choose which tables, columns, and measures to expose to front-end users in your sandbox so that they can, create visuals, play around with minimum risk of, doing something that they shouldn't be doing or getting weird results, or possibly using the wrong measure and the wrong type of visual. So in this section, I'm going to show you how to design a front-end experience for your sandbox to just give the user the most options possible in sort of playing with your sandbox, setting up bookmarks, things like that. So let's go ahead and jump back into Power BI and PowerPoint so that I can show you how to set up this front-end sandbox environment. So again, all of the really hard work for the sandbox is effectively already accomplished. If we go over to our page settings and go down to Personalize Visual, we've already created our perspective, our Maven World Cup sandbox perspective in the tabular editor, so that any of the personalizable visuals in our sandbox are only going to pull columns from this all matches table. And out of all of these measures that I created behind the scenes, only about 6 of them are going to be user facing. So only 6 measures in one table are actually included in this perspective, so that we don't have to worry about our users, selecting one of these measures that is maybe incomplete or has an error or can only be used in a visual a very specific way to work correctly. We're only basically giving our users access to the most simple parts of our data model. So that was the hard part. That's already done. Now we're just going to create a front-end experience for the sandbox to sort of help our users get the most out of the sandbox. So what I'm going to do, or what I propose, is we can create some buttons over here in this area that I laid out that will let our user choose how many visuals they're going to actually get in the sandbox. Because maybe our users just want to have one big visual to play with. Maybe they want to compare, 2 visuals side by side. We're trying to sort of create a streamlined experience that a Power BI developer has. We're going to give our user the ability to create one or multiple visuals, effectively creating kind of a very simple dashboard for themselves that once they've formatted it the way that they like, that they could then save as a bookmark or something, so that they can come back and revisit it later. So we're going to create, multiple layouts that they can choose from, and then give them the ability to sort of save it as a bookmark for future use. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to hop over to our PowerPoint template, and I'm going to go ahead and give ourselves a little bit more room here in the sandbox. And I'm going to start overlaying my buttons over here in this section. So first, I'm going to add just a title to my sandbox environment. And let's just call this Sandbox Views. I'm going to go ahead and center this. I'm going to add it about right there. And I'm going to increase my font size about as large as I can get it. And if you want to add even some instructive text, it's also a great area to do it. So use the buttons below to determine the layout of the sandbox and how many visuals you have. No sense getting too carried away with our text. We want to keep it as simple as possible. And since, Sandbox Views is sort of our headline, we want this descriptive text to be maybe a little bit smaller, just, barely there. And I'm even going to sort of push it to the background by darkening up the color of it a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just give this kind of a light blue color. And then the rest of this area is going to be where we actually create our buttons. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab a rectangle. And I'm going to need about 4 of these. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and just use Control and multi-select all 4 of my buttons. I'm going to go up here to my alignment settings, and I'm just going to make sure that they're all aligned to center and distributed vertically to make sure that all of the spacing between them is identical. And then I'm going to multi-select them one more time. I'm not going to need an outline on these. I'm going to select kind of a dark blue here for the background color. I'm going to go to my More Fill Options settings, and I'm going to see what this looks like with 50% transparency. Overall, pretty happy with how that looks. Next, I need to give the user some kind of visual representation of the layout options that they're selecting. So I'm just going to grab a rectangle here to represent, just a Power BI visual. And I'm going to drag that and just put it right there in the middle. And I'm going to give it, kind of a blue color. No outline needed. Again, none of this has to be perfect, and I'm kind of doing this on the fly, so not going for perfection here, just kind of trying to illustrate the overall idea. If this were a real situation, I would definitely be playing with making this look better for a lot longer, but for this purpose, I'm literally just trying to sort of create the overall impression of the layout that we're creating. So we're effectively creating 4 different layouts for the user. We can even make this a little bit larger if we want to. We're going to give them the option to either use 1 big visual, 2 visuals side by side, 1 large visual, and 2 stacked smaller visuals, or sort of a 2x2 grid of smaller visuals. And we can go through here real quickly and add some text boxes. 1 large visual. Going to make sure that that font is large enough for us to read. I'm going to drag it into place here. I'm going to copy it. The next one is going to be 2 visuals side by side. The next one is going to be 3 visuals. And this is going to be a 1x2 grid. And the next one is going to be, you guessed it, 4 visuals, and it's going to be a 2x2 grid. So now I'm just going to go through real quickly and select the backgrounds and the fonts. Whoops. And I'm going to go to my Arrange settings. I'm going to go to Align, and I'm going to make sure that all of these are perfectly centered with the background of my Sandbox views. So Arrange, Align, Center. And that's just going to make sure that, literally all of the text and the backgrounds of the buttons are perfectly aligned. The actual boxes here sort of representing our layouts, I think it's fine to just eyeball those. So they may not be exactly perfect, but they look pretty good to me. So we've got our new Sandbox view set up. On this other tab that I created here, or this other slide, I'm literally just going to grab my buttons and I'm going to create active states for those buttons. And these active states are basically just what the user is going to interact with in Power BI. So when a user selects 1 large visual, I want this button to have special formatting. Like I want it to be white and bold. I want the user to know that they have selected this. And as the user hovers over these other buttons, I'd like for them to sort of pop or shimmer so that the user understands that these are buttons that they can interact with, that they can select as well. So I'm going to go over here real quickly. I'm going to grab all of my backgrounds here. And I'm going to make white the background. I'm going to drop my transparency settings over here to 0 transparency. I'm going to grab all of my fonts or my text boxes here. I'm going to change the color to something that pops a little bit more like red. And then I'm going to grab all of the rectangles that make up my different layout examples, and I'm going to fill those with red instead of blue to sort of create that contrast. I've got kind of blue and red as my US, theme for this World Cup challenge. Blue is sort of the inactive state of these buttons. So in order to make them pop more, I'm going to use a more vibrant color like red. And all I'm going to do is I'm just real quickly going to save all of these to my Sandbox folder. And I'm going to call the first one 1, which is totally fine because it's a button representing one large visual. The next one I'm going to save is 2. And this is working well from a very simple naming nomenclature, but it also represents the number of visuals that the user is going to be including in their Sandbox layout. Okay, so I've managed to save all 4 of my buttons. Now I need to resave my Sandbox background. So I'm going to save this as a JPEG. I'm going to overwrite my background for the Sandbox. And I'm going to close out of PowerPoint. I'm going to go over to my canvas settings, go to my canvas background, remove the background that's currently there, grab my updated background, make sure that it fits well. You can see that some of my text here is a little bit scrunched. I'm going to go to my canvas settings and I'm just going to play with the height a little bit to sort of make sure that my text reads well without any unnecessary scrunching. Okay, that's looking pretty decent. Let's go ahead and go up here to insert, and I'm going to need 4 of these buttons. I'm going to kind of drag these into position super quickly. I'm going to go and multi-select all of them. And under the style settings for these buttons, I'm not going to need an icon and I'm not going to need a border. And in fact, I'm not going to need anything at all when these buttons are basically not being used. So I'm going to go over to my fill settings and I am going to turn on fill. By default, I don't want anything here. So I'm just going to make the transparency 100%. I'm going to change my hover settings for each button. So for on hover, I want to grab the first active state of this particular button. I'm going to make sure the transparency is set to 0. And I'm going to set the fit to just fit so that now when the user hovers over this button, they see the active state of that button. And now we're just going to kind of rinse and repeat that. So for the next one, I'm going to go to I'm going to go to browse. First, I need to make sure that I'm still on hover, and I am. And I'm going to browse for my second button, change it to fit, set the transparency to 0. Going to do the same thing for my third button. Grab number 3, set the fit to fit, set the transparency to 0. Going to go to browse, grab button number 4, set the fit to fit, set the transparency to 0, so that now the user has these options to choose from. So we have the inactive states of all of our buttons already determined for us. Now I'm going to copy all of these and I'm going to select all of them and I'm going to just reset all of these buttons to their default state. So I need to remove the border and icon settings again. And for the first button, I'm going to set the fill to on, the transparency to 0, and I'm going to grab one large visual and set the image to fit. And then I'm just going to go through all of these real quickly. You can multi-select if you want to, just to save yourself some time. I'm going to turn on fill, set the transparency to 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab button number 2, set the image fit to fit. I'm going to grab number 3, set the image to fit. And I'm going to grab image number 4 and set the image to fit. So now, in order to sort of round everything out, because we basically got all of the ingredients here, I'm going to go ahead and set up some bookmarks. And these bookmarks are how the user is actually going to navigate between the different layouts here. So let's go ahead and add 4 bookmarks. I'm not going to need data settings on these. I just want to mix up the visuals. So I'm going to turn off those settings. And then the last bookmark I'm going to create is just a reset bookmark so that the user can return this page to its default settings. And for this bookmark, I'm going to leave data turned on because I want to save the default settings for all of the visuals, filters, anything that the user has added. I want to reset using this bookmark. And so I'll go ahead and call this bookmark Reset Sandbox. For bookmark 1, I'm going to call this One Large Visual. For my second bookmark, I'm going to call it 2 Visuals. You can already guess where I'm going with the rest of these, 3 visuals and 4 visuals. Most of the work's already done here. Now let's go ahead and resolve our buttons, because you've noticed I've got 8 buttons that I've set up here. And you might be thinking, Sean, what's going up with that? Shouldn't we only need 4 buttons? And I'm going to show you why. In this case, I would prefer to use 8. So let's go ahead and grab all of our buttons over here. These are going to be our off buttons. I'm going to name them accordingly. That means that everything else, these are on buttons. Let's go ahead and drag these into position. I'm literally just using the arrow cursors on my keyboard to sort of position these. Okay, and for the first setting here, for one large visual, we're obviously going to need these turned off. This is the effect that I want. I want the user to always know, which sandbox view they're on, but I want them to also see that they have the ability to hover over the other options. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the background of the active version because I'm not going to need that. And then I'm going to update visual 1 or bookmark 1 for one large visual. And next I'm going to go through and just update all of these settings. So the next bookmark is going to be 2 visuals. I'm going to just update, which of my buttons are hidden and which ones are revealed. I'm going to update my 2 visual bookmark. Next, I'm going to go through and make sure that 3 visuals is turned on and 2 visuals is turned off. And I'm going to remove the interactive button behind 3 visuals when it's turned on. And I'm going to go ahead and just complete this for my 4 visual option. And then I'm going to go back to one large visual, and I'm going to make this the default state and tie that to my sandbox. Now I need to actually go through and add actions to all of my kind of hoverable buttons that allow the user to actually select them and point at the correct bookmark. So let's turn on 4 visuals. Let's turn on 3 visuals. Let's turn on 2 visuals. And let's turn on 1 visual. And now you can see that the user can hover and they can select and view the different layouts. The next thing that we need to do is we need to start actually laying out our visuals for each of the sandbox layouts. So you don't have to get too extravagant here because at the end of the day, the user is going to choose their own sandbox layout and they're going to play with the visuals. So we don't have to get too crazy with which visuals we create. In fact, I'm just going to grab home team for my y-axis and I'm going to grab wins for my x-axis. And this is a great place to go ahead and start playing with some of your default settings. I'm going to keep my background, but I'm going to add a visual border with 10-point rounded corners. And I'm going to make that border blue and see how that looks. Overall, pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and save this view to my one large visual and reset the sandbox. For my 2 visual view, I'm going to go ahead and hide that visual, but first I'm going to copy it So I'm going to hide that visual, and then I'm going to paste it, copy it again, and sort of drag those into place. And I'm going to grab these two new charts over here in my selection pane, and I'm going to group those, and I'm going to call this group 2 visuals. Now I'm going to go to my 3 visual settings, and I'm going to hide everything else. I'm going to paste again. And I'm just going to sort of drag everything to fit the template that I told users I was building for them. So I now have my 1x2 grid. I'm going to go ahead and multi-select all of these images, create a visual group for 3 visuals. Now I'm going to go ahead and select my 4 visual layout. I'm going to hide 3 visuals, hide wins by home team. And I'm going to go ahead and start dragging these into place. And there's my 4 visual layout. And I'm going to go ahead and multi-select all of these in my selection pane, group them, and call this group 4 visuals, update my bookmark. And now I'm just going to go back one at a time and make sure that all of my settings are correct on the bookmarks. So I'm going to hide 4 visuals here. This is all looking good. I'm going to go ahead and update 1 large visual and update reset sandbox. On 2 visuals, I need to go back through and make sure that wins by home team is hidden. I'm going to unhide 2 visuals, update, and go back to 3 visuals and make sure that I'm showing the correct bookmark or the correct visual group for 3 visuals and update it. And now do the same thing with 4 visuals and update that. Then I'm just going to go back to 1 large visual, make sure that my sandbox is now, my reset sandbox bookmark is updated with all of the new settings. And if you just want to retest everything real quickly and make sure that it's working, looks like everything is golden. That is exactly what we wanted. Now, the only thing that's really left to do is make sure that our users always have the ability to reset the sandbox. So let's go ahead and add 1 more button here. And I'm going to just grab the reset button from my button options, and I'm just going to add something up here. Don't have to get too crazy with the formatting. Let's go ahead and open up our style settings, and I am going to add some text here that tells the user this button is intended to reset the sandbox. I'm going to keep it right aligned since my icon is over here on the left. If you want to scrunch things in a little bit more, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to make the font a little bit larger so that it's easier to see. And if you want to start playing with the formatting, now's a great time to go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and grab our icon, see what that looks like red, kind of keeping with the theme here. Everything's looking good to me. Let's go ahead and update our hover settings. If you want to, you can, maybe increase the weight of the reset icon when somebody hovers over it, sort of telling them that, okay, this is interactive. We're just trying to give some kind of visual flourish that tells the user this is a button that can be interacted with. We're going to do the same thing with our text. When the user hovers over this, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can make the text bold, just like I'm increasing the weight of the arrow. And I'm going to go ahead and assign this an action of reset sandbox. So everything there is looking good. Let's go ahead and resave our report. Let's go ahead and open Power BI back up, and let's go ahead and copy over our data set with the updated Sandbox tool. Once that has finished, let's go ahead and go back into our Sandbox report, make sure that everything is working correctly. You can see that I'm now able to toggle back and forth between the different layouts for our sandbox. And if the user wants to come in here and compare wins versus losses, for example, that might be a good idea for the side by side. So let's go ahead and see. I've got wins by home team. I want to change this visual from wins to losses. It's all looking pretty cool. Maybe I don't want to compare wins and losses. Maybe I want to compare, goals scored versus goals conceded. Looks like our sandbox is working great, so, now as a user, maybe I'm coming in here and I'm like, this goal scored by home team versus goals conceded by home team is a really interesting, view of this data. What I really want to do now is I just want to save this bookmark. Well, again, as a user, users can already create bookmarks from your reports when you give them that option. So you might want to include something in your report that explains to a user how to use this, because a sandbox environment is still going to be new to a lot of our business users who aren't particularly Power BI savvy. But you may want to put like a tutorial or something in this that pops up and explains to them that, hey, once they've created something that they like, I can always add a personal bookmark, like World Cup goals scored versus conceded. And then they can save that so that later on, if they come back to this report, they'll always be able to see the view that they created. Let's go ahead and change this. And then if we want to see our World Cup goals scored versus conceded, there it is. We're able to just jump right back into that anytime that we want here. And then when the user hits this reset button, they've reset their sandbox. There are literally, thousands, if not an almost infinite number of ways that you could set up this sandbox environment, depending on your data. Other ways that I have set up sandbox environments is not by creating different layouts for the page. Sometimes I create it by sort of giving again, sort of create guardrails so that the user doesn't do anything that, they probably shouldn't be doing with the data. Sometimes I give the user options to create, horizontal or vertical bar charts. Sometimes I give them the option to create line charts or scatter plots. And then I have notes that come up sort of recommending to the user which fields or which measures would work best in those visuals. Obviously, it depends on how data savvy and visualization savvy your users are. It depends on the users. It depends on the complexity of the data. But this has been a template for creating a sandbox that has been pretty easy for my users to understand and figure out. In the interest of time, the only thing that I'm not going to do here that you would probably want to do when creating your own sandbox is literally just take, something like a snipping tool, and I'll go ahead and drag this over here. Maybe set up a delay, like you'll see here that I'm going to my little clock here, and I'm setting up a 10-second delay for my snip. And then I'm going to new, and I'm going to go ahead and hover over this and sort of point to what the user needs to see. I'm going to wait for my snipping tool to sort of activate here. And then, if you really wanted to help sort of give your users a quick tutorial, maybe you just want to grab an image of the personalized visuals options. You can put something like this into PowerPoint and like literally sort of, circle the personalized visual icon so that they know which icon to select to enable all of these personalization options. And then you can create like another bookmark that just sort of, reveals this image so that the user knows what they're supposed to hover on. Again, pretty easy to set up, a bunch of different ways to do that. In order to sort of keep this video a little bit shorter, I'm not going to walk through step by step how to do that. But sandbox environments are pretty easy for your users to understand. You just need to make sure that your users understand which button to press on a visual in order to personalize it, and then maybe give them a quick walkthrough the first time. But at any rate, I hope you found that sandbox design tutorial useful. Again, if you're just watching this video and you haven't checked out the first part explaining how to use the tabular editor and perspectives to sort of limit which fields and measures your users can deploy in the sandbox, I highly recommend that you check out that first companion piece to this video, whenever you get a chance. Thank you so much for checking out this Power BI Sandbox tutorial. There's absolutely no obligation whatsoever, but if you found this video useful and you feel like subscribing to my Sweatpants BI YouTube channel, I would greatly appreciate it. But at the end of the day, I just hope that you learned something valuable that you can take back with you to your day job, to your company, that is hopefully going to make the lives of your users so much easier, make your life easier because users are now able to sort of fish for themselves instead of coming to you for every little Power BI question that they have. I've got lots of other great videos on Sweatpants BI already completed if you want to check those out. And I've got more videos on the way in 2023. Again, thank you so much for supporting Sweatpants BI. If you have ideas for videos that you would love to see in the future, I am all ears. I don't always check out the comments on YouTube just because a lot of my energy sort of goes to LinkedIn. So feel free to DM me on LinkedIn if you have any ideas or if you found this useful. Love communicating with the Power BI community here, especially people that are just sort of learning or starting their Power BI journey. So thank you so much. Hope everybody continues to have a wonderful 2023. Keep learning everything that you can in Power BI. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next Sweatpants BI video.